This is part 1 of the Craftsman Atlas Head and Table Lift Rebuild series. If you haven't seen the accessory video for the head and table lift, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we're going to be opening the box, disassembling the head and table lift, and then soaking it in citric acid and simple green. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. From the first time that I saw a head and table lift on a drill press on Garage Journal, I knew I wanted one. And down here in the South, I live in Georgia, they are not common at all. In fact, I've never seen one being sold on a drill press. So I reached out to my friend Frank Lee and told him if he comes across one that is in decent shape, but the paint on it is really bad, let me know and I would like to buy it. And last year he did so. And so he sent it to me, and now I'm unpacking all the boxes. Everything I've ever gotten from Frank comes packaged like it was done by a professional. I mean, it's just, he does a great job of packing this stuff up. And I'm just so excited to finally get one of these things. They do sell on eBay from time to time, but people selling them think they're made out of gold, so they charge ridiculous prices. And if you're up in the Midwest or the Northeast, you probably can find them on drill presses, fairly common. But down here in the South, I guess we're just not the kind of people that need them. So here I am just unpackaging it, and the paint on it is a little rough, but it could be salvaged, but I'm going to be repainting it, so that's not a problem. The gears on the crank end you can see there, and then the gears that are inside the gearbox that I'm about to look at here. They're all in really good condition. They're not missing any teeth. They're not chipped or anything like that. And that's typically the area that's usually damaged on these things when you find them. So I was really surprised. Frank had been telling me forever that he was going to send me an extra sleeve for Chuck to use to reassemble Jacob's chucks. And he included it in this package, and I wasn't expecting that. That was a nice surprise. But here you see pretty much all of the parts for the head and table lift. So I'm also going to be cleaning and repainting a couple of column collars at the same time, so you may see them in a couple of these images. But here we are just disassembling the already disassembled head and table lift. So this definitely has the, if you will, old school lock nuts and sleeves in there. And they've been painted over. So I have to get them out of that gearbox. So I'm just using a wooden dowel to tap them through. This one, the sleeve, comes out pretty easy on both this piece and the other piece that's got them. But the lock side that the nut fits in is really in there on both of these. It's a very tight fit. So here I'm just removing the retaining collar, and this is what holds the gear inside the gearbox. It's just got a small slotted set screw, and then it comes right off of there. So the lock nut and lock sleeve are both made out of Citric, just like the gears are. And Citric doesn't do so well if you leave it sitting in citric acid for a long period of time, like 24 hours. So all the parts that have Citric on them, they're going to go in the citric acid, but I'm only going to leave them in there for about an hour, and then I'm going to rinse them off. But Citric is kind of a pot metal. It's a tin alloy, crazy conglomeration. You can Google it and see what it's actually made of. But it was really popular back in the 40s, 50s, and even into the 60s. Why they didn't make those lock nuts and sleeves out of hardened steel like the drill presses utilized later on, I don't know, but they were cast out of Citric. Even on a couple of the King Seeley models, some of them will have cast lock sleeves and nuts. And why the gears were made out of this, I have no idea. I know Horn talks about it in his video that was in my review of the head and table lift. But in any case, it is what it is. So here we're just disassembling the crank and gear. And there's a small pin that holds the gear on its shaft. And there it is. And then there's a longer pin that holds the shaft inside the crank handle itself. So I'm just using a wooden board here to protect the gear as I clamp this in the vise. And then we're just going to use a pin to drive, or a punch to drive that pin out. And the pin has got a spline all the way down the side of it, so it's in there pretty good. And there's the pin. So now we should be able to disassemble the shaft and the crank handle. Now I've got that plate, the cover plate is a little bit wider than where the jaws would close down on this. That's why I'm using those two wooden blocks there. Again, we're just going to drive the shaft out this time with a punch, a brass punch. You can see it kind of popping out. And then just knock it loose. And there it is. So there's another locking, or another collar there. It's a locking collar. I've already removed the set screw from it. And There's the shaft and the gear. So here I'm just removing the patent panel that's on the side of the gearbox. It's held in place by 2 drive screws. And this first drive screw I can get to pretty easily with a small punch. I can knock it out. There it is. But the second drive screw is deep enough in there that it's really hard to get to. So what I'm going to do is protect the data panel with some masking tape. And then I'm just going to use a Dremel with a cutoff wheel. And I'm going to slot the head on that drive screw. And you can see the slot there. And then I'm going to try to spin it out. But it doesn't really want to come. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees and then slot it again. Hopefully there's enough metal there that I can back it out with a screwdriver. Basically, these drive screws have got twisted splines on them, so you can basically unscrew them out of the hole they're in. And sure enough, there it is. So that's a good way to remove a blind drive screw as well. Like if you don't have a hole all the way through the casting and you can't tap it out from the inside, that's another method there to get it out of there. And there's the patent number panel. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to soak all this stuff in simple green. And everything except for that patent panel is going to go in the simple green. So there is a bearing. It's a thrust bearing. But I'm going to soak it as well and get all that old grease out of it. The inner race of that bearing is open, so we can repack it. So here we're just applying the simple green, and we're going to let this soak for 24 hours. And this should remove some of the paint and pretty much all the grease and oil. And after 24 hours, then we're going to pull all that stuff out of there, and then we're going to rinse it off and take a look. You can see some of the paint has come off of the gearbox and the other collar, but not enough of the paint. So I'm going to strip it, and this is citrus strip. This stuff is non-toxic, and it doesn't smell bad or anything like that. It's not harmful. And basically you just paint this stuff on it, and then you wrap it in cellophane and let it sit for 24 hours. And it does a really good job of removing the paint. And those are the 4 parts that have the paint on them. So now we'll just wrap them in some cellophane. And then we'll let them sit for 24 hours. So 24 hours later, we rinsed those parts off, and then we used a wire brush while we were rinsing them off to remove all of that paint stripper and most of the paint came off. Here we have some citric acid and we're getting ready to soak everything in that. And I use one of these shot glasses per gallon or 2 gallons. It's not real scientific, but I put 3 shot glasses in there, and then I just fill it with water and kind of mix it up as I'm filling it so that the citric acid starts to dissolve, and then we just pop the parts inside that citric acid. And like I said, I'm only going to let the Zamek parts soak for about an hour or two, and then 24 hours later I'll pull everything else out, rinse it off, and then hand dry it. You can see there's still a little bit of paint left on some of these parts, but we'll take care of that in the next video. So that wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. This will probably end up being a 3-part series because it's not a whole lot of stuff to do. But we'll have some fun doing it. And like always, I will see you next time.